All right, beautiful humans, welcome back to another episode of Naked Sunday. I am your host, Caleb Nelson, and I have the lovely, the vibrant, the jovial Jaime Nolan on the program. I feel like saying program makes me think about like my grandma, like the programs. I'm watching my programs. I love anybody who says programs, by the way. Anyway, Jaime, thanks for joining the show today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be on the program. I think that it's a good way to start it off with the good grandma reference into the shows.
We're gonna have a party, aren't we? Well, I like to start my episodes. For the record, I didn't even tell you this, but I usually tell people I have no framework or any plan for these because I think just good conversation is interesting enough. But I do have one thing I start everything with is I like to tell people why I appreciate them because I think this is a good step in the direction of the whole thing called world peace. Maybe if we tell each other why we love each other, we have a better place to start from. And now we've met in person once, and we're going to dive into this part a little bit because I want to get into it a little bit. You gave me this, like, you blindsided me with this insight around love languages. And why it's so meaningful to me is that I appreciate anybody who's willing to have a deep conversation. I'm past that point in my life where I just want to just have only surface shit. Like, it's not exciting to me. And anytime I'm around somebody who's like, no, let's go there. Let's get into it. Let's be real with each other. And mind you, I talked with you once or twice beforehand. And now here we are just over a great dinner, hanging out. And I think we just kept talking for like 2 hours afterwards as well. I just love that. There's a safety, there's a security, there's a curiosity about anybody who is willing to do that. And that's why I love you, because you're awesome amongst the many reasons, but that specifically really like sticks out to me.
Thank you. I feel the same way. I love when I can get into a conversation that's like all the way deep and quickly, and people are willing to go there. So thank you. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you seeing it in me.
Oh, like you just smile right now. You're already just putting a smile on my face on top of that. You're doubling down. You're doubling down. Well, let's get into it then. You know yourself better than I. So, Jaime, would you share with the audience who are you?
I am a business and life coach, as well as the CEO of Las Comadres, which is a community of entrepreneurial, spirited women who want to do soulful work as well as, fulfill a entrepreneurial dream. And so, I guess for who I am, also is a mom of three teenagers, which is weird. And yeah, I live in Miami, and try to just make the world a better place.
Well, look at that. We're in that vibe together. Let's make the world a better place. You've got a lot of things that you're juggling. I mean, the fact that you're a parent, you're a business owner, and you're leading all these people. I don't think enough people give credit to what that is, balancing that type of energy. Like, people already struggle with work-life balance as is. Tell me a little bit about how that's been on your entrepreneurial journey, because I think that's where a lot of people really struggle. What's that been like for you?
I started my career as an entrepreneur. Like, I started off as a personal trainer, and then I was like, oh, at some point I'll get a real job. Like, that was my like thought process. And I was like, oh, when I become, when I get married or when I become a mom or something, I will like, embrace, the culture of 9 to 5 and whatever, whatever. And I did for like a minute. Like, I was like, this is terrible. Like, I am not good at this. Like, I do not like to follow the rules at all. And I started to realize, like, especially most of the entrepreneurs I knew, they were really creating lives that they wanted, right? Like, it wasn't about like, okay, I'm just gonna make all this money, sell my company, and then like get out and then retire, right? They were like, even if they wanted to make all the money, sell their company, and get out, they wanted to build something else, right? Like, so it was always, I love being around people that are doing those kinds of things. And to me, it's like, it's so holistic. Like, no part of my life is separate, right? Like, I'm having a conversation with you at a retreat about like business ideas plus love languages, right? And then I'm having like an idea, then I'm like talking to my kids about, like how to be a decent human in the world, right? And then I'm like talking to my clients about like the parts of business that are amazing, but like how do you wrap the rest of your life in? And then, you know, and in our community it is always that conversation, like who are you first, and then like how does your business support that, and then beyond that, like how do you make money doing it, right? And so I always think it's like just one giant piece, and how it wraps up is like that's the interesting part to me, and like how you get the pieces involved so that you feel like you're not trying to like section off every part of your life. Like my kids know all about my business, right? My husband is involved in like the day-to-day things that are happening, right? And like I love that I get to pick them up from school, and at the same time it drives me crazy that I still have to run through carpool, right? Like that it's both, and I think that that's the, like you can't be like it's all amazing, because there's parts of it that you're like this is a total shit show and I don't want to do this piece, but then you get to like be like, oh, okay, maybe I need help over here. Maybe I need to be able to, like you get to really look at it like, how does your day work? And what does it feel like? And like what works for you? And I don't know. I think that that's the part of entrepreneurship that's interesting.
Mhm.
Um, and how to just like keep it like, why'd you start it in the first place?
Mm. Well, why do you think people actually struggle with the work-life balance thing? You had brought up a really interesting, who are you first? That for whatever reason that stuck out to me. Why do you think there's that friction around that?
I think a lot of times you have this idea of who you want to be, and then you are projecting that into your life. And then that in reality is not what you want, right? Like, there's a lot of working parents that are like, I want to put my kids first, right? Which sounds like the right thing to say, right? But like, also, like, I don't want to just be someone's mom, right? I want to be Jamie first. And then in that, I am also these people's mom, and I am the CEO of this company, and I own this other business, and I have all of my friends, and I love staying married, and right, like all those pieces. And it's like if you take your values and you're like, oh, these are going to fit into what you think they should be, it's a lot of times on the shoulds, right? It is on that piece where you're like, well, everybody says I should do this, and so I'm going to do that. And then, but is that like really true? Like, what if you were like, my kids are second? Like, how does that feel? Oh, okay. That feels realistic. Oh, okay. Is that, is second okay? Yeah, I think it's okay. So sometimes they get bumped all the way up to first. Yeah, definitely. Right. Just like everything else does. So it's like the movement of that stuff, and knowing like nothing's permanent. Nothing's, like maybe for a moment you're going to have to like, sometimes like emergencies come up and you're like, okay, for a moment this is the most important thing, and knowing that that value is, that's what's valuable. And then it's like, all right, like sometimes work is going to suffer, right? Like there's an idea that you can actually do all of it perfectly. Like that is like where people think like, if I just have this system, or if I just have this thing, right, all the parts, then it will work perfectly. And it's like that's so far from the truth. And it's like, can you get to the people that admit these truths, right? Like, oh, all right, for very long period of time, like I had 15 hours a week that I worked. 15. That's a very small amount of time. That is less than like, as a small part-time, right? And I was like, okay, for those 15 hours, like what can I crank out? What do I want to do? Who do I want to be seeing? Like who's my clientele that I can help the most in that period of time? And when people would ask me like, did I also not diminish that? Right? It still was a business. It still was, I was like, but that's like the only amount of time I can allocate towards this business at that moment. Right? My kids were super little. I was like, one of my daughters has autism. Like my life was packed. I didn't want to give it up because I loved it. But I also was like realistic. And I knew that it was a moment in time. So I was like, oh, okay, will there be a moment that I can grow it? And like, what parts do I not need to be happy about?
Mm.
Like, there was this therapist that like said to me one time, I was, my kids were very small. They were like 5, 3, and 1. And life was just like like a lot, right? Where you're just like, okay, this one has to go to therapy, and this one here, and this is going on, and I've got my business running, and I've got this happening, and like, and then there's just like all the stuff you have to do in your house, right? Like especially if you have 3 little tiny kids, like there's a lot of cleaning and a lot of laundry and dinners, and that people need to eat 3 meals a day, and you're like, why? And you're in this like stage. And I was talking to my therapist, and I was saying, like, I was talking about my husband, and I was like, I just feel like I have to do all this stuff because when he's doing it, he's not happy. And she was like, okay, but when you're doing it, are you happy? And I was like, no. And then she's like, so you want him to be happy? Like you want him to not only do it, but you want him to be happy doing it. And I was like, yeah. And it was like, as it was coming out of my mouth, I saw all the errors of my ways, but I was like, oh, other people don't have to be happy for me to like allow them to do things. Like they can be doing it because they want me to have some space to be happy, or they can be doing it so that like because it just needs to be getting done, and they don't have to be happy about it getting done. And so I was like, oh, I am not in charge of everyone else's happiness. And I was like, oh, okay. That was like a space where I was like, oh, how many parts of my life do I think that this is what I should be doing? And if I'm unhappy, I'm okay with that. But if other people are helping me and they're unhappy, I am not happy with
Mm.
that. And I don't know if that answered the question. I went very far around, but there you go.
That's okay. There's no rhyme or reason to all this. This is just flow. The word that you kept coming back to was should, and of course the tendency with that is, oh, should is compared to what? It's the expectations. And what, as you were saying, well, whose expectations? And is it okay? Is what is okay? And I think a through line underneath all of that, which I think would be valuable for anybody listening, is it's up to you to decide what's okay. And
Yeah, I
that's
think that that's
hard.
like a big piece that we are not taught. Like,
Mm.
it's like when you're a kid, you were taught, you're like, okay, I have to follow all these rules and I'm supposed to do all this stuff. And like, and people really keep you to that, right? Like the adults in your life hold you very strictly in this idea of like, you go to school and you need to get good grades so that you can go to college, so that you can get this job, so that you can be happy in the long run, right? It's like this idea of, and you do these things in these orders to get to this end result that's sort of vague in like you're going to work in this job, and then once you're in the job they're going to tell you that you'll be happy once you're retired, right? It's like oh, you're going to do all this stuff, and it's like okay, but like what do you want to do? And like what's your space on it? What's your values? What's your like? And I think that is shifting a lot more now. Like I think that there is a level of consciousness that is shifting in the world, that there's a lot more people that are like, yeah, I'm not going to do all that. Right? Like I'm not, that's not the path I'm going to follow. And like things are switching, but it is this, like, we aren't taught to have that thought process. What do like, what is what you're looking for? What do you really want? What do you want for the next 2 years? Because like what you might want, like my lifetime goal might be very different than what I want, like, you know, first 2 years out of college is very different than what I want when I'm 45, right? Like, and that might be like hey, I'm going to do this for here to then be able to evaluate to get to the next maybe 5 years, right? And like that, the language of like, I hate when I like meet people and they say to me, well, I have to do this job now so that I can get here. And I'm like, what if you took a year off? And like the thought to them is like, like I'm gonna die. I'm like, nothing's gonna happen. Like literally nothing's gonna happen. And that part is the part that's interesting. Like when you get to the space of like, what if you didn't? Like, all right, like what would happen? And who would you be if you did something slightly different?
Mhm. There's certainly a lot of fear around not fitting the mold, which is ironic when you consider that entrepreneurs typically are like, I don't want to fit into a box. But the first thing they do as soon as I'm an entrepreneur is, well, what's the box I need to go put myself back into? Because we're so used to, well, this is really comfortable and I want to feel like I have a sense of direction. What I thought was really important about what you're saying is, like, as kids, there's not this perhaps it's changing, and I like to believe it's changing. There's not a lot of curiosity and question. There's the, what do you want to be
Mm-hmm.
when you grow up? You ask it once, they say, I'm going to be a fireman, and that's the last time you ever ask. Or I want to be a doctor, I want to be an astronaut. And it's more, my impression has always been, it's more, oh, we want a cute response, oh, he wants to be an astronaut, or he wants to, one of those things, as opposed to, well, no, let's talk about, what do you care about, what are you enjoying right now, how about we explore that together, how are we going to facilitate that, let's see if you even like it, and then we'll learn. And that's what I appreciate what you're saying. There's, let's see for the next 2 years. It's okay to say you don't know. I'm going to do this to test it and see and reassess. I'll make a new decision from there, because it gets, there's a lot of this all or nothing. I'm choosing my life path right now. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you're going to get into a car accident that's going to change the course of your life, or you're going to meet somebody who you fall madly in love with, who has wants and needs that you need to grapple with, and all the other things that come along with that thing called life. So the, again, what I appreciate is that, oh, maybe we can just stage things a little bit smaller into a way that is digestible as far as you can see right now, what's reasonable for you right now. And shit, just practicing, this is what I want for right now, just saying that and doing it. And yes, dealing with the consequences of that, because there's, and perhaps consequences might be a hard word for a lot of people to grapple with, but trade-offs, there is going to be trade-offs on both sides,
Yeah,
potentially.
or results, right? Because like I
Yeah.
think that that's the other side of it, right? It's like whatever your actions are, good, bad, whatever, right? Like, you know, there, whatever movement you have, you're heading towards something,
Mm.
right? And so then it's like having also like that point of review, right? Like I think there's nothing like, I mean, I love setting goals. I love looking at the end of the year. Like I love all of that stuff. I love the quarterly. I love all it, right? But in it also the like space of like, all right, like where do I want to be, where do I want to be 5 years from now? And then like, all right, like those should be more, how do I want to feel? What do I want to, like maybe it has some dollar amounts, maybe it has some like kind of vague, you know, whatever, but like you got to leave some of that up to the universe, right? Like, but like as you get closer to 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, 6 months, right? Like that's when you can set the things that are like, hey, I want to accomplish this thing. But like the thought of thinking out, like, there's no way I could have created the life that I have now. Like if I was like 18 and I was like, this is what I'm gonna do when I'm 46, I wouldn't be here. Like 18-year-old me didn't have a sense of any of this, right? And so I don't know, maybe 18-year-old me would have a much more interesting side. I have no idea, right? It's like this idea of like, where are you gonna like, how can you expand into the greatest version of yourself? And like, does that expansion like mean that you're taking everybody else's opinion with you? Right?
Mm.
Like, are you taking all of the stuff that society has told you? Are you taking all the stuff that your friends are telling you? Are you taking all the stuff that your parents have told you? Are you taking all the stuff your teachers have told you and being like, okay, I can only go as big as that? And then being like, all right, like, what if half of that's just bullshit? Right? Like, what if half of that is just like their own limiting beliefs? They can only see so far. So it's like, what if you could double that? What if you could triple that? What if you could make that, grow in some kind of different way? And like where would you end up? And so I don't know, I think it's always interesting.
As you were talking about, 18-year-old me versus where you're at now, what's funny to me is tell any entrepreneur, like, this is what's exactly good to happen and this is the best version of you. The first thing they're probably going to say in that moment is like, don't limit me, don't tell me what I'm allowed to do. That's that I think one of the biggest draws, as kind of alluded before to, was entrepreneur the entrepreneurial life presents limitless possibility. I can express myself however I want and I don't have a cap. So when you flip it around and you do that, it immediately creates resistance, which is funny to me that the idea of predestination probably irks a lot of people, of like, oh, this is what I was this there's a very interesting line between the woo and like the practical side of all this that I think is really, it's like, I was always destined to be in this place, but don't tell me how I'm supposed to get there. There's a which one do you want? Maybe both. I don't know. And man, what you brought up, it's like, whose voices are you listening to? Is it your parents? Is it your teachers? Is it your friends? Is your reassessing which of those things hold true and you want to allow and continue to allow in your life is such a difficult framework. You had brought up you had started as a trainer and helping people transform their bodies. I think that that's worth leaning into a little bit here, because I think some of the greatest coaches ever always started in the health field, because to impact somebody on that level, we'll call it weight loss, we'll call it physical transformation, you had already thought about, like, nothing is just like one boxed thing. I think there's no truer realization than in the field of health, because you ask the same damn questions when you coach somebody on a business or you coach somebody on anything else. But for whatever reason, health is a very difficult one. What were some of your biggest lessons about that experience in your life that you've continued to apply into all aspects of your coaching and entrepreneurism and family? What I think there's some big takeaways out of that.
The thing that I noticed the most was like how two people could come in on the same day. I had a very standard clientele. They would like the I worked at like one of the largest gyms in New York City, and one of the also most expensive. So there was this like, and it was very vertical, right? So you had to like come up a lot of steps to get to where we were. And so you could see people coming up the steps, and like the other trainers would be like, Jamie, one of your clients coming. Like, and I'd be like, what? And I'd look and I'd be like, I trained 35 to 55-year-old men, newly divorced, with a good pot belly. They had to have a decent size belly when they got to me. Usually looking slightly lost. I guess I was like not very intimidating. And so they would see me and they'd be like, that one, right? And so a lot of time like talking about like relationships, talking about, I spend a lot of time talking about food, but I spent a lot of time talking about relationships and like how they were in the world. I mean, maybe because I've always found this the most interesting, but it was always really interesting the people that would come in, and it's like two guys could show up on the same day, same age, same general demographic, whatever, same income level, same, you know, slightly nothing about them that was like, oh, well, this one's going to succeed, right? Or hit their goals or, whatever. And like, what would be the things that shifted the behavior, right? Like, what would be the part that would like click with them, that would get this one to go, they see me twice a week, but they're in the gym 5 days a week, like they're in the gym another 3 days a week, and on the weekends they're like doing something outside, and they've changed the way they eat, and they've changed the things they listen to, and they changed the way they function in the world, right? And then this one's just like coming 2 days a week and wondering why nothing's happening, and like, what was it about them that changed? And it was always mindset. And it was whether they came with a mindset that was like, they used to be a high school athlete, and so they understand the way that these things work, but they had just gotten out of shape. All right, maybe. But a lot of it was like, could you take them into the idea of hitting their goal? Could you take them into like one step closer to happiness? Could you take them into this like idea of you could be different than you are? And which people held on to that in their daily decision, right?
Mm.
Because it's like most of that stuff is not like, it's not huge, right? It's like, am I going to take the stairs, or am I going to walk, or am I going to take a cab, right? Like, oh, okay. Like, I'm going to take the elevator and I'm going to take a cab. Okay, it was only 10 blocks, but whatever, right? Like, each one of those little decisions is making what's happening in their lives. Also, like, are you appreciating the things around you, right? Like, for me, gratitude is always really huge. I'm always like, okay, do you appreciate your life? Do you? And if you don't, like, what do you want to change? Because like you have control over all of it. And that would always be the part where I would have these clients that would come in and they're like, and then my boss, and then this thing, and then da 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 da. And I'd be like, and in New York, right? It was a much more like, I live in Miami now. And so like in New York, it was much more like complaining. Like there was and I grew up on Long Island. And so like I love that banter, but like I would change it all the time. I'd be like, okay, well, what was one good thing? And they'd be like, oh, like they'd be like, what do you mean? I'm like, what was one good thing that happened in your day? And they'd be like, I'm like, did you have a bagel? And they'd be like, yeah. I'm like, oh, was it good? Like, did you have bit like, was there a good cup of coffee? Was there, a piece of it that was, like, did you meet somebody that was really cool? Did you have a cool conversation? Did you close some business deal that you've been like working really hard on? Did you sit in a comfortable chair? Like, what are the things that like make the day good? And the people that were willing to have those conversations made the most shift in their physical appearance and in their lives, which is the same way I feel about like people in their business, people in their life. It's all the same kind of coaching. Like, I'm not really a different business coach than I am personal trainer. I mean, I might yell a little bit more as a personal trainer, but like it was definitely like the banter was a little bit quicker, but there's that idea of, do you believe that it can be better? Do you believe that like everybody's doing the best that they can? Do you believe that you're like in a space that could be elevated? And like, and are you willing to do that? Because I think that that's the other part. There's a lot of people that are like, I'm not willing to change that. I'm not willing to change these things. And if you're not going to change them, like, why do you expect something to change?
Mm. That's the wild one. Waiting for basically a savior to come in and solve my problems for me. Da, 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 da. Where does that gotten everybody? That's oof. What I think that people don't see on the downside of that is that if you're always waiting for a savior, you're always dependent. And that feeling like you're not enough will always persist. And I think that's a cornerstone of the mindset work that I think you're bringing out there. And I love the gratitude piece because, especially if you're just saying day of, hey, what were you grateful for today? Doesn't matter what the day is. If
Yeah.
you have the ability to seek the positive in every instance, maybe it was, I woke up today. You have life. That's something to be grateful for. It does shift the way you perceive all the other things that are in your day and what might be coming, and from that it bleeds into hope, which when you're feeling negative is usually you're feeling devoid of hope. So again, I love that you brought out, oh, I don't see myself differently in either arena. Maybe the end product is different from a physical standpoint, but the same questions are universally there. That's why I think I actually, in many ways, would say getting people to change their physical health is harder than getting people to build their business.
Yeah.
Be,
I think it's because of like the actual physical choices you have to make every single day. Like, and the results are not as fast. Like, you start doing stuff in your business, you can see it, right? Like, if you're like, hey, I'm going to send, I want to find new clients and I'm going to send outreach to 40 people, and you get back 4 responses, you're like, that's 10%. That doesn't suck, right? But you're like, okay, I'm going to like eat like in a very clean manner, and like 2 weeks into that you've lost 0 pounds, you're like, fuck this, right? And you're like, I just want some chocolate cake, right? And which, whatever, there's room for chocolate cake and a good diet, but like there's always that, like, the if you can get people to tell you how they want to feel versus what they want to look like, a scale is like a great like metric, but it's not like the end result, right? Like, if you're like, hey, I want to feel energetic, I want to be able to do this race, I want to be able to play with my grandkids, I want to be able to, like, whatever, like, whatever the feeling is, like, I want to be able to walk up a flight of steps and still have a conversation on the phone and nobody knows I'm walking up a flight of steps, like, I don't know, whatever your thing is, those are way better, way easier markers than like this number or this measurement, or because, like, I think a lot of times those things end up changing, but people hold on to them. Like, in the transformation, like, someone might be like, I'm going to get in shape, and in shape means this. It looks like this, right? It looks like, I'm going to like be down to whatever 5% body fat, and I'm gonna, like, get to this, what I'm gonna have abs, and I'm gonna whatever. But like, you might get to where you're like, oh, I've gotten in this much shape, and now I realize I could run a marathon. And that's a totally different body and a totally different situation, that you might not care about those other things, but people get stuck on the, like, this is what I said I was gonna do. And then they're like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this and this. And you're like, okay, but like, you might need a separate like piece. And I think a lot of times it's a feeling. You can get to feeling closer,
Hmm.
faster.
There's a couple things that came out of that. Getting the feeling faster, to me, one, the first part is people buy with feelings. I think that's
Mm-hmm.
very important for anybody who's, for the record, mostly it's entrepreneurs and coaches and people in high leadership positions that listen to this. Hi, everybody. Um, you're always selling, no matter what.
Always.
And people are buying with their feelings, their emotions. So if you're not empathizing enough to allow them to feel, or endeavoring to understand their feelings, kind of wasting your time. You're going to just become a dictator and be like, here's the brass tacks, is all you need to do. Though there's a time and place. But the other side of that is making sure people can understand what I liked you said about the feeling is, I think a lot of people don't know what it takes in many times to have, we'll call it 5% body fat. Just because you have 5% body fat, how do you feel in that body? Do you
Not
want to?
usually good.
I have yet, the 99% of all people that I've ever watched perform in a figure competition, bodybuilding, any of it, you actually have a conversation with them and you peel back a layer, like ask one or two really good questions, you will hear a mountain of insecurities fall out of their face.
Well,
When you
and
said
usually misery. Like,
misery,
when
yes.
they get to the end, and I mean, like, it's a huge goal and it's amazing that you can accomplish it. And like, I think there is a level of pride within it that, like, that it is something they're trying to get to, obviously. But there is also always, on the other side of it, is the like deprivation and the like misery of like what they have like needed to do to get there.
Mhm.
And like, maybe you're a little bit fatter. Like, maybe you're at 10%, maybe you're at 9, right? Like, whatever that's like, and then that part feels really good. Like, your life is really full, or that you have an enormous amount of energy. Everyone I've ever known that's done a figure competition, by the point they're actually doing the competition, they're so exhausted because they don't have enough fat in them to like actually, function. So they're just like exhausted. And like, that's not the feeling you want, right? Like, if the idea is like, okay, I want to be like living a very full life, like I want to be able to like participate in conversation. Like I had a friend that when she was doing it, every time she would get to that point, having a conversation was difficult because like the mental energy it took to speak was like, and she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like this was a goal and I'm glad I did it. And like she did, several whatever around the calendar competitions. And then she was like, and I'm done. And it's like, it's a super cool goal, but it's also like knowing yourself and like how you want to participate in life and all those pieces.
That's a great thing you brought out there. Living a full life is the sustainable, like, is that sustainable? And don't get me wrong, there are people I know simply they enjoy that and they enjoyed building their life around those cycles and they're aware of the trade-offs. But when you start adding elements such as having a family, having another business, having other life responsibilities, and do you want to be able to have meaningful conversations? Is that sustainable? I do want to make sure that we bring this out. This is not an excuse for people to just say, fuck it, I'm not going to take care of my health. I think that's a very, like, people get very binary on both sides. Like, well, that person's miserable. And the other, no. Like, still take care of your health. And there's a healthy range. Most people have a very misaligned perception of what health is. That's me broaching that topic lightly right now. And people say, well, I don't want that because all I hear is this, or they hear the dogmas and everything else. But then they stop pursuing, no, there is a way to achieve health and wellness and groundedness and the feeling that I think you're speaking to with a better percent body fat, with the ability to go keep up with your kids, go on a hike, do it, name your thing. And the feeling that I really appreciate, like, you're living in a different sense of self. Of there's new opportunities that opened up to you because you're physically capable enough to go experience it. Not least of which, as we're talking about conversation, when you have more energy, you have better conversation, which typically leads to better opportunities around business, especially if you're a curious person. You're going to be more engaged in somebody across from you if you're in a negotiation or whatever. It's a prudent strategy to be physically healthy to then also then become financially healthy, more wealthy. I think people miss those two things. So like, well, I'm all on this. Well, that's that same binary bullshit of like, well, why can't you have both? But how can you? And maybe it's not going to happen tomorrow. Maybe it's going to be a year, 3, 5, 6, 10 years. But you might enjoy the ride a little more, and you might not destroy every other relationship in your life along the way. Call me crazy, but that might be something that most people are actually worried about before they actually take the first step to changing their health, building their business. Is, I'm worried, how's this going to affect my family? How's this going to affect the people that I am responsible to? All those things. I'll get off my high horse for a minute, but I don't know if
Well,
any of
I
that
think
landed.
like the part of that that's important is like how do you like, are those things separate in your life, right? Like this goes back to the idea of like the holistic life, right? Like if you want to be like healthy, okay, why, right? Like what is healthy? All right, figure that out for yourself. Okay, what is healthy? Okay, well, why do you want to be healthy? You want to live a long time. Okay, great. All right, you want to be healthy because you want to be able to do certain things, right? You want to be able to like maintain your own yard or your house or whatever, or you want to be able to play with your kids, or you want to be able to play with your grandkids, or you want to be able to, you know, like do fun activities with your friends, whatever those things are, right? Where it's like health is not in a bubble that's like separate. It's all part of like, why do you want to do it is all because of the other pieces of your life, right? Then it's like, okay, like who am I around and are those people doing those things? Like my favorite person I ever worked with was when I was 17. I was a swimming instructor and like a lifeguard. And I had a guy come in who was 98 years old that wanted to learn to swim.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
For his 99th birthday, his birthday was at the end of the summer, and he wanted to have a pool party because his grandkids and his great grandkids love to swim.
That's
And
so
I
cute.
was like, this is the best thing ever, right? Like this to me was like the summer project. Oh, and he told no one. No one knew, right? Like the only people that knew were the people at the pool. He had private lessons with me. He came every single day. And this man was dead weight. Like he just sunk to the freaking bottom of the pool. And he's 98 years old. Like I'm teaching somebody to swim that has been on this planet for 98 years and has not learned to swim. So, and he just wanted to get like across the pool. Like that was it. And the pool wasn't that big. I mean, it wasn't like a full 25 meters or anything. He was like, I just wanted to be able, and he wanted to be able to float. That was his two things he wanted to do. And I was like, okay. And this guy came every single day. He came to the pool, like he would come when the little kids were still taking their lessons and he'd watch them. Like he was always really excited to watch the little kids. And then he was like, he'd get in the water with me and he worked so hard. Like he was like, gonna swim. And at the end of the summer, they rented the pool and he told no one that he knew how to swim. Everyone knew he couldn't swim. And they were like, are you sure you want to have your birthday party here? Whatever, whatever. And he's like, yes, the kids will love it. The kids will love it. And then before we let them get in the water, he got in the water and he swam across the pool and back. And then he floated on his back. The amount of joy in this like pool, like I could still cry. This was so long ago. And I was like, it was so cool to be able to see someone that age like know that they could do something differently and achieve it, and also like see the people around him know that he worked that hard, right? To know that he did it for them. And then the little kids were like super excited that grandpa was actually in the pool, right? Like he had spent his entire life like maybe in like waist deep water because he was really scared too. Like he was not, it was not like a, oh, I just want to learn how to swim better. Like this guy knew how to not, did not know how to swim at all. And putting his face in the water was super scary and all this stuff. And it's like the idea that you can, no matter how old you are, like change the way the neural pathways work in your brain. No matter how old you are, you can change the way you think about something. Like, and maybe because I learned that lesson from him that early, that I'm like, you can do whatever you want. So like, what are you choosing? What's the like? What's the choice? If you're 98 and you can learn to swim, like we can all learn whatever we want physically. It might just take a lot of work. Like, and do you want to have that? You know, he wanted to be able to enjoy like the next summer because in his mind he was going to live to 110. He used to tell me all the time, "Ah, oh, I got 10 more years. I got 11 more years." He would tell me all the time, and I'd be like, "Dude, you're 99 years old." Like he was moving. He still drove. Like this guy was not the kind of person that would see like the challenge and be like, no, I'm not going to do it. And maybe he was. Who knows? Maybe he spent the first 90 years being like, no, I can't do that. And then at the end, he was like, you know what? Maybe I could try.
What really strikes me, and I love how like it hits you too, obviously, a very emotional experience to see that. It's something so simple, but that probably was worth all the money in the world for the guy. And
Yeah.
it's not, when we look back on our life, it's going to be simple things. And I start thinking about, well, so I'm 30, I'm going to be probably 36 around the time this airs. And I think, oh, tack on another 60 years to my life ish. Huh. I could still be creating powerful experiences and being innovative with really simple things. What if I practice that type of diligence and open mindedness and willingness to grow slowly for 60 years? Whoa, what kind of, and that, again, I don't know this guy's story. You said he might have just changed his mind a month before that. What if you gave yourself 60 years as a runway to create that type of foundation or breadth of like capacity? What could you still be doing then, and what kind of full life could you still be experiencing? I think one of most people's biggest fears in life is not actually death, it's suffering and unnecessary suffering at the end of their life. Well, how do you hedge risk? You take care of yourself. I don't know. Like with really
Well, and
simple
you do
things.
it, and you do it early. Like you do it like,
Yeah.
and it's never too late. I think that that's the part that's always like there's this idea of, I used to get a lot of clients that would be like, oh, I'm 50. I've passed that point. And I'm like, 50 is like halfway. You know, I mean, if you do it right, if you at 50, if you had the worst possible life, all the things that were super indulgent and it was phenomenally good and also terrible, right? Okay, you did all of that. At 50, if you decided, hey, I'm going to change everything, you would change the trajectory pretty easily. Within the first year, you would change a lot. Within the next two, you change an enormous amount. And some of it's going to be like, I mean, it will obviously be the physical, right? But some of it's going to be like the way you change your brain is going to make the way that you do things, the way that you take risks, the way that you decide this stuff is going to also change the trajectory. And that stuff is not a huge shift. Like, both of my parents are in their late 70s. My dad's almost 80. They are in better shape now than they were in their 40s. Because
Wow.
in their 40s, they were working full time, they had two kids, their parents were like at the end of their lives, so they were doing a lot of like caretaking and whatever. They didn't have a ton of time. They're retired. My dad lives in Sedona, Arizona. He's outside all the time. He's hiking all the trails. He's doing all the things. He also like he at some point got a cholesterol reading that he didn't like, so he went on this experiment of the gym. Like my father had never worked out in a gym before, but at 75, he went to some gym and like talked to the guy there and was like, "What do I need to do?" and did the things and like they eat really healthy. It's great. My mom lives in Jacksonville. She plays pickleball like 4 days a week. She loves that the Medicare has the silver sneakers program so that she gets to go to the gym for free. She goes to classes all the time. Like, and then she's riding her bike and she's outside. Both of them are in way better shape than I remember them in my childhood. And I'm like, this is the way. I'm like, I look at them and I'm like, this is how you age, right? Like they made the choice that as soon as they had a little time and space, that they were filling it with things that made them feel really good, which meant that they also like met more people doing the same things as them. So then their circle, like their community, that is normal, right? Like, because that's a big piece of it. The people you hang around with, if it is normal to sit at a bar and eat bar food and drink beer and that's what you do, then that's what you do, right? If the people you hang around with, like, you're gonna, go hike a trail and then, go out to a healthy lunch and maybe have a beer with lunch, it's fine, right? Like, that's what you do, then that is like what becomes the norm. And so I think like with the idea of like, what do you want your life to look like? What do I want? I want my life to look like my parents' life at 80, right? Like my husband and I joke around that they're gonna like live until they're like 120. Like we're always talking about my husband's like, your parents are gonna live forever because they just continually do things that are expansive. They also volunteer a ton. So they're still out in the community doing things, right? They still participate in stuff that makes them feel good. And they also have friends that are different ages. That's a big one too. So it's like if you know that that's where you want to be at 80, like how are you making that happen at 30? How are you making that happen at 40? How are you making that happen at 60? Right? And like, all right, like what do you want your life to look like? Who do you want in your community?
I think one of the biggest takeaways out of that for me was how it's inspired you. And I don't think enough people think about the behaviors they are modeling for others. And this is a concept I've been bringing to the forefront lately. A lot of people talk about generational wealth.
Mm-hmm.
I believe an even more profound pursuit is generational health. Namely, because to truly achieve generational health, you're going to pass through generational wealth. And the concepts that to achieve one or the other, apply in both fields. So to master the core principles of it allows you the breadth to be able to do that, and it can pass on for year to year to year. And as you're saying, oh, we think my parents are going to live to 120. Imagine that they added on 30, 20, 15 years of ability to model, to mentor, to teach, to show the next generation, or impart any of their wisdom to you so that you can impart it to another generation that you have. People don't think about this compounding interest that becomes quite exponential the second you get 2, 3, 4, 5 more people bought into the, oh, like that's a very full, vibrant life for a long life. It's quality and quantity. And it's just something people kind of flip like, oh, I want to be good for my kids. Well, what does it mean to be good? Are you actually showing them how to live in a way that they can also, what's the teach a man to fish kind of idea, or teach a man to teach a man how to fish? Then the whole community will always be plentiful. That's, man, I hope your parents just hear that, because I think that what a profound gift to pass down through the generations. Because obviously you already care about health, but you can contextually look at the, oh, this, all right, thanks for the model. I guess I can do that. On top of the fact, since you already have a great skill set, you're probably going to improve upon that. You probably are hedged to be able to do much more than just that, which I think is really cool. What might that give to your kids? And the so much.
And I think that the big piece of that is that hope, right? Like sometimes you can't see something until you can see somebody else do it, right? So like if the only thing that you have seen is like generational unhealth, like unhealthy behavior, like that the way that you die is this long 20-year process of falling apart and like being really sick and it's terrible. And if you think that that's what the last like 10, 20 years of your life look like why would you want to get old? Like you know, like why would you want to get to the point of like that I have this wisdom? Why would you want to get to the point of like moving from the, you know, maiden to the crone, right? Like why would you want to go into that next stage? And I think that that's like where a lot of people get stuck, is this idea of like, I want to be so youthful. And it's like, what if you were healthy and like in the space of wisdom, right? What if you were healthy and in that space of like, you can still do a lot of stuff. We were in Colorado with my dad a couple of years ago, and he hiked, like, we did a 5 mile hike. My dad was leading all of us. My children were like dying. They're like, oh no, why do we have to keep doing this? You know, whatever. And I'm like 75 at the time. You know, like I was like, this man is like showing that, like he's showing at the time my, you know, 10-year-old that when you're 75, you can be forcing people to go on hikes, right? He's showing that like it's possible to like that retirement can be this like space of fun and the space of like, you know, learning more, as opposed to this idea that like you're old and you're gonna like sit in your house and die. And you know, why would anyone want to get to that space? Like it's like, oh, let's just try to be more and more youthful. And it's like, okay, but like what if like living really actually meant like living?
On top of that, which is, and you start to see how many people just completely disfigure themselves for the appearance of youth, but they feel like garbage on the inside. The other side of it is it's also encouraging flippant behavior for the next generation. Because if they're looking at that, we're like, that's the whole YOLO mentality. Whatever, YOLO, I'll just do backflips off a house. Whatever. Because I guess getting your jollies has to be completely extremely physiologically exhilarating. Not to say there's not people who do some wild, cool things, and part of their thing is like, I love doing stunts and all that. Like, got it. But there's a lot of people out of just peer pressure of like, I don't know, and I'm just gonna go flippantly be risky with my life, not realizing there's a whole breadth of ways to experience connection, vibrancy, love, happiness, joy. It's sometimes a little more subtle, but I mean, when you hear, I mean, I don't know about you, but like whenever I hear somebody, I like hanging around older people just because I think we've lost reverence for wisdom.
Mhm.
It's really subtle shit. For that, for to that point, my idea of like a pipe dream, like a party, is sitting around a campfire with a couple of good friends, hearing deep, meaningful stories. Like that's my journey into the ether. I don't really care about because that depth of somebody's life experiences and their stories, ooh, like that's exhilarating. But you got to slow down and be willing to sit in a space to hear a story. That's but it can be quite profound if you give yourself permission. Like if the only thing we're valuing is gaudy X, Y, and Z, not to say that stuff is bad. I think it's cool to have the nice house and the car and the thing and all that. But if that's the only idea you have of success as opposed to wisdom, no wonder people are only chasing the surface level, but then get there and I guess I'm still not happy. Fuck it. That's that's why I think health is so powerful. You said the groups you're associating with. Obviously, I think that's really powerful. The average of the whole 5 people you spend that bit. Big believer in, I think it's a Jim Rohn quote.
Mhm.
You have a community, which I think is really inspiring. Now, make sure I don't mess it up. Los Comadres.
Las.
Damn it. Okay.
In the
Don't speak
feminine.
Spanish, damn
Las.
it. I was close.
Las
I had
comadres.
comadres, las comadres. Okay, I need to get the masculine, feminine pronunciations proper. What inspired, take us down that, like what inspired this community?
So the community started with my original business partner. She was hosting business masterminds. She would pull together, what the people that were in it, and then have these parties like every quarter. Everybody that had ever been in it had been invited. So the group got bigger and bigger, and it was always these really cool women that were just like doing cool things. Like, you know, the people that she attracted into her masterminds were usually, some woos, a shaman here, acupuncturist, cranial sacral healer, kind of like things where you're like, wait, what exactly is that? Okay. And then also artists and lots of coaches and lots of people that are just doing cool things in the world that needed some like, hey, here's some structure, right? And so as she had these parties, they eventually several of us went to her and were like, hey, we want to hang out with these people all the time, so you need to make a community. And she was like, that sounds like a lot of work. I don't know if I want to make a community. And she's like, well, what would it look like? And we went through, there was like 5 of us that went through it. And we like really kind of like got down to like what a community would be and what it would look like. And so she started it as a business. And then there were like a bunch of us that helped her. All right, we'll host events, we'll do these things. And it was an in-person community in Miami, and it grew super fast. It was 30 people, and then it was 50 people, and then it was 100 people. And we were like, whoa, okay, this is a real business. And this needs to, like, it's not a side project. This is actually something. And we were like, okay, like, what do we want to do with it? And so, the 5 people got to be a few less, and her and I really kind of got more and more solidified on like what we wanted to create as community in Miami. And we were like, okay, Miami is a very shallow place. You talk about like, like what people look like and all these things, and it's hard and it's big. So it's like very spread out, like geographically. So it's sometimes really hard to find your people. And we were like, okay, we want to be able for when people want to find their people to find us. We want them to feel like if you are an entrepreneur in this city and you want support, you want love, you want people that are going to like pick you up when it's going terribly, and also going to really like celebrate with you in the greatest possible way when it's going amazing. And that might all be in the same day, right? And like wanted to learn and expand. And so we just got like really clear on what that was. And then in it just kept growing. And in 2020, we had the greatest plan of how we were going to franchise it and this whole beautiful business plan. It was so nice. And by March, it went out the window, and we had moved online like everybody else. And when we moved online, we had a lot of people. We had already been in business for about 3 years. And when we moved online, we had a lot of people that like couldn't make it to our physical events come back. And they were like, hey, we love the community, but it was too hard to drive the hour from Broward County. It was like, oh, I moved to New York and I always missed comadres. Like I always wanted to come back. And so we had a lot of people that came back and were like, okay, I want to participate in this. And are you going to keep it like this? And we were like, we'll see. We don't know. Like everybody else, we don't know. And so by August, we were like, we really like this layout. We really like having people all over the world because we had people in Spain and we had a bunch of nomads. So people that were in Mexico and Bali. And, we were like, oh, this is really cool to have members in New York and members in Ohio and people that are now doing business together because they met here. And can you keep that same vibe? Can you keep the values? Can you keep can the events still be as like loving, and can the events have as much connection? And so we worked really hard at building that. We built out the actual community on Mighty Networks because we like the idea of like a space that when you came into it, you were just with like our people. And it's been a really interesting experiment. By 2021, my business partner was ready to go write a book and do some things. So I ended up buying her out. And so now I have taken on a new business partner, and her and I are, in the growth and expansion stages of it. But it's been this very interesting idea of like, what are our values and who do we want to be with? And like, if you're growing your business, like, what do you need? And what you need at the beginning stages, and what you need in the middle, and what you need when you've hit $1 million, sometimes are different things, but like everybody can always learn from each other. We've recently really discovered that it's where soul development and entrepreneurship meet. We're like, oh, okay, that's where some people are coming in here, they've hit this pinnacle of success, but they feel like they've like lost their soul. And so they come for the parts where they're like, okay, I want to learn more about myself. I also want to be in community with people that are like doing really good things in the world. And then we have people that come in and they're the most soulful, right? They come in, they've done all the work, they have done all of those things, and they have this business that they're just like, I have something good, but I don't know how to do it, right? And so they come in to learn, how to make sales funnels and how to get through these parts, and for the support of when you launch and you're like, it went amazing and now I don't know what to do with all these people that I have, or it goes terribly and you're like, no one signed up. And like, what you do with those pieces. And it's always good to have a place to go. I think that like part of what we sort of miss in modern society is like, what used to be the town square, or what used to be the village, right? Where you're like, what's the fire at the end of the night, where you're like coming to tell the stories and do the things, and to like have a place to point people like, hey, you can come here. This can be a place where you can learn, and can be a place where like sometimes you're the expert and sometimes you're the student. And I think that's always like the coolest place of it.
Mm. What is the translation of Las Comadres?
It means it's what godmothers call each other.
Mm.
So like, if so like what I would call like my friend who is the godmother of my children, she is my comadre. And that is the idea of like, this is the person that you trust with your most important thing, your most important possession.
Good name based off everything
Yeah.
you told me about the sounds like the purpose of the community is just that. You're the person I trust with all the things when I need it, and where I
Yep.
go to feel safe and to grow in alignment with both my heart and my practical aspirations. Um, it's fantastic. I really, obviously, I think the world of you. I've just loved you since our first conversation. Um, but I think that what you're speaking to, this idea of community, is, I think a lot of people struggle to find their tribe, especially when you're an entrepreneur. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
create this thing. Does this idea that I have, does anybody give a shit? Does anybody care? Not only that, do the people who give a shit, are they are their motives in alignment? How do I know? And part of the journey is you gotta face some bumps and bruises as part of building some tough skin, because it's not for the faint of heart. It really does take some courage and some grit to to get through some of the initial phases. But once you find people that, I always just say, get it, when you don't have to explain all the other shit, and you're like, oh, like I can be myself and I don't have to explain why. Huh. Well, that saved me a lot of time. No wonder I got to my goals a lot faster and I felt good the whole time. Huh. Yay. Like, that's what I think, what I'm hearing in the, we'll call it the space you're creating, literal or more metaphorical. It's that really loving and comforting space for expansion without blowing yourself up at the same time. Because how many people really ask, like, hey, how's the other things in your life going? If you don't put yourself around people, if it's just like square peg round hole, this is the way, the only way, well, again, the thing we talked about before, like it's we didn't get into business to just do it everybody else's way. I have a different purview on how I wanted to go with it. So I love that there's a community that is a safe space for people to go be challenged. I gotta imagine it's not just, you gotta still do work. That's part of life.
Oh yeah.
But that's nice to have. Like, oh my God, we need more like that, and that's fantastic that somebody like you is at the helm of that. So you're awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. In case you
You're awesome.
needed a reminder that you're awesome.
I mean, it's always good to hear you're awesome, right? Like that always makes everyone, it's like, oh, okay. The things that you are doing and putting out in the world feel good. It's like that's the goal. So it is much appreciated.
Hey, that's what it comes down to, and all. It's like we gotta love on each other, and it's not. People go a lot farther, I find, when there's the accountability side. Don't get me wrong, but man, hey, cool. This is the thing you're doing. This is awesome, and it's, holy shit, I want to help other people get better. Oh my God, what a terrible. Like, who the fuck doesn't love that? Like, and that not enough people. That takes guts to do it. I've come to a place in my life. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about, like, I don't give a shit if I agree with their business or not. If anybody just goes into business on for themselves, I'm like, awesome. That's fantastic, because I understand the leap of faith. It's really looking in yourself. Am I willing to take a gamble on myself? And that's hard if you've never done it before. And I think there's just a lot of love there. And obviously you guys have been very successful, and it's really fantastic. And I know I've had the privilege of meeting a few people that are part of the tribe. To that effect, as I'm looking at the time, if somebody's listening are like, yo, this Jamie, she's rad. I need a Las Comadres in my life, because I'm a Comadres, but I need to find my tribe of Comadres. Look at me trying to work my Spanish like accent and all that.
You're getting there.
I'm working. I gotta practice makes perfect, baby. What's the best way for somebody to connect with you?
Instagram probably the best. I mean, that's like where I am hanging out the most. I mean, our website, lascomadres.com or .club, sorry, is always the, fastest way to just like see what we're doing. But Instagram is, and it's just Las Comadres, whatever backslash Instagram. And so I am always like totally open to having conversations. And like, the thing that I think is interesting is when people come, they're like, well, what's the trick? And I'm like, there's no trick, dude. Like, I just want people to be in a really cool community. And whether that's, that you come in and you want to come and try it, right? Like, we always have events that are open to the public. And like, it's amazing to watch people's faces, right? Like, they're like, oh, we have cafecito every single Monday morning where we just have coffee. We have coffee and a topic, and there's a whole conversation around whatever that topic is. This month we're talking about alchemy. The questions have gotten very out there and interesting, but it is this idea of like, what are you transforming, right? Like, what are you transforming in your life from some metal into gold, right? And where people are in those processes. And like, there was somebody in one of our open ones last week, and she was like, the time her eyes were like huge. And afterwards I was like, oh, if you want to stay on and have a conversation, feel free. And she was like, okay. And she said that she was like, how'd you find all these people? I was like, what do you mean? I was like, she was like, I've never been in a room with 15 other people like willing to have this kind of conversation. And I was like, this is what we're doing. Like, I am here on this planet to make sure people are having these conversations. I was like, whoever wants to come with me, that's great. Like, that makes me super happy. And so it's been a very, like, I'm always like totally open to talking to people. I love talking about people's businesses. I love talking about people's like what they're doing in life and what makes them happy. And so it's a cool place to be.
I love that. We'll make sure that that's in the show notes for anybody who didn't quickly find a way to type that into their phone. That's awesome. Definitely go check it out. Jaime, parting words of advice, wisdom, thoughts, whatever you want to share with our audience to close out on for today.
I think for today, it is like figure out what your values are and then find the people that align with those things.
I can't say it any better than that, so I'm not even going to try. I love it. You got me fired up. I'm ready to run through a brick wall. Let's do this. Let's go. Let's go. Jaime, I love you. I'm so grateful that you've come into my life. I'm always excited to see where these types of friendships and relationships go. And this is, I think I told you once, like, I don't know why you came into my life, but I feel like you're here for a reason. We'll see where it goes. And I'm just happy that there's somebody like you out there who's holding a space for people who need that kind of love and attention and support. So I highly recommend anybody listening, go check it out and find their tribe, have some fun, and things will be rad. You're just awesome. You just put a lot of joy into my day. That's what it comes down to.
Thank you.
That's what it is. Everybody, again, Jaime's contact is going to be in the show notes, so go check that out. Go check out the crew. There's a community waiting for you with open arms. Go do that. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.